Hey everyone, I'm Bobby Sylvester, and we've got a bold prediction show coming your way, but first I want to tell you about playdraft.com. So I did all those best ball leagues I've been telling you about, but now I'm shifting my attention to week 1 DFS, and Playdraft has this unique DFS game where you actually do a live snake draft, like the ones we do at the start of our season-long leagues. That's how you choose your lineups instead of just having a budget and everyone playing the same players. It's a blast. I hope you'll join me in playing at playdraft.com/fantasypros. Again, that's playdraft.com/fantasypros. All right, let's talk some football. Welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Bobby Sylvester with Mike Tagliere, as always. Hey, Tags, how's it going, man?
Dude, it's so good. It is so good. You know what I'm doing today, Bobby? I am sitting here working on week 1 articles, and that makes me a happy man. I was talking with our guest before the show and about how, some people don't get into podcasts or, articles until like maybe a couple weeks before the fantasy season. So They may not have heard some of the things that we've said over the offseason, and we have to remain mindful of that. So, if we sound sometimes repetitive because we may have brought something up, we'll always try and do it in a different light. But this show is going to be a fun one. I am so looking forward to it.
This is my favorite show to record every year. Like, everyone loves the sleepers and everything, but you know me, man. It's all about the hot takes. We're going to be giving our hot takes. But before we do, we've got a special guest joining us today, and that's Smokey John Brown, wide receiver of the Arizona Cardinals. All preseason, as you guys know, we've been hyping him up as one of our favorite breakout players. He's only one of 3 receivers who finished in the top 24 for fantasy football with less than 105 targets. The other guys in that company, Doug Baldwin and Sammy Watkins. That is great company to be in. John, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Oh, I'm glad you guys have me on.
No, John, yeah, we're happy to have you on. I've been looking forward to this. Everybody that listens to our show, I've been hyping you up all off season. Like, I can't talk enough about you. So I'm definitely happy to get you on the show. But we want to start it off with the first question I think everybody wants to know is, do you play fantasy football?
No, I don't play fantasy football at all. The crazy thing is I learned about fantasy football my senior year in college. I never knew about it. I never understood it, but I don't play it at all.
Yeah, I'd imagine that's the case with most professional athletes. And, I'm sure you get annoyed when they just don't target you that much one week. And then you get blown up on Twitter by people who own you in fantasy football. It's just ridiculous, man. You're going out there trying to win, right?
Yeah, John, I promise you that I'm not one of those people that is going to come after you if you have a bad fantasy day. I mean, that's the worst thing people can do is go after an athlete after he has a performance. I'm sure it weighs on them more than it does us, So, with that being said, how are you feeling, John? I know we've been dealing with the quad injury, and there's reports everywhere, talking about the sickle cell trait that you're dealing with and how it takes longer to recover from. So what better way for us to go directly to the source, having you on our show, asking you directly about it? Does this affect your recovery time and kind of how you're feeling right now?
Oh, the recovery is coming along good.
Great.
People just talk about things that they don't really know. That's the first thing that they put it on, the sickle cell or whatever. Mm-hmm. But they don't really know. But the recovery is coming along good, and I'm actually feeling better day by day.
John, we're really glad to hear that, man. I'll tell you what, you looked phenomenal hauling in those 2 touchdowns in the preseason game. And John, I've got to ask you, how much stock do you actually put into going up against a top-flight cornerback? Like, we're always talking about it in fantasy, how it changes the game so much, covering these primetime wide receivers like yourself. And who's the toughest cornerback in the league to line up against?
I just try to come out and do what I can do. But
yeah.
As far as the toughest corner, I would say Richard Sherman. He's the toughest corner that I face. The dude is he's smart, he's competitive. He knows guys really good. So you basically have to have a plan B, going against Richard Sherman. And, I just love his game.
And he's been a wide receiver before, so he knows what's going on in your brain,
Yeah, no, definitely. Richard Sherman is definitely one of those cornerbacks that Bobby was referring to when we talk about shutdown corners and the guys that we try and sometimes to avoid in fantasy football. So it's good to hear, that on your side of the case. Now, going to the other side of the thing, let's talk about some wide receivers that maybe you look up to. Who are 3 of the wide receivers in the NFL right now that you kind of look at and you're just like, man, these guys are studs?
The top 3 right now, I can say, Antonio Brown,
Yeah.
Julio Jones, and, I definitely, I love Odell Beckham game. We both came out the same year. And, since we got in, he's been doing a great job every year.
Yeah, he's an incredible talent. And I'll tell you what, John, you don't play fantasy football, but you just named the top 3 fantasy football wide receivers in order. So I think you'd be an expert, man. So, John, what's it like playing next to Larry Fitzgerald? I mean, he's been one of these top-tier wide receivers for a long time. He's probably going into the Hall of Fame, learning so much from a guy like that. What is it like?
Oh, he will be a Hall of Famer, but, playing with Larry is great. He gives good advice on the field and off the field.
Yeah.
And just seeing him in practice, every day he always happy. And when you watch him practice, the same stuff that he do in the game, he do it in practice. So, I learned those things from him. Practice the same way you would play in the game.
Of course. So, John, eventually it's going to come to the point in everyone's NFL career where it just comes to an end. When yours gets to that point, hopefully a long time down the road, by the way, do you know what you'd like to do for your second career? I mean, I just love my job, and I hope you can find something like that after the NFL.
Yeah, once I'm done, I'm thinking about, going into coaching. Just being around, great coaches, like Coach Bruce Arians,
yeah,
Tom Moore, those guys. Like, I learned so much just in my 4 years of playing with them. And, I think I can be able to go back and, help people, especially coming from where I was born and raised. We wasn't able to go to football camps, and I wasn't able to learn the things that I'm learning from them now. And it's just the small things. You think it's the big things that, most players do, but it's basically the small things, and I learned a lot from them from that, and, I appreciate it, and I think I can give back and help.
That's a terrific answer, John. I love that, man.
Yeah, John, speaking on the subject, I want to take a minute and let our listeners know that if you don't know John Brown, the human being, the guy behind the shoulder pads, the guy behind the jersey that you watch him play on Sundays, he's such a phenomenal guy. So sometimes, in fantasy football, we attach our personal emotions to how we, sometimes feel about a player, and that goes into our rankings of players. And just the fact that I kind of know who the person that you are, it makes me want to rank you higher. If you don't know the story about with John and his brother, go and look up, just type in Google John Brown, The Promise. It'll pop up, and look into that. I wanted to make sure when we had you on this podcast, John, that I let you know you're an inspiration to kids, to everybody, to me, for everything that you do. And I look forward to you pointing up to the sky a whole lot more in 2017. And, just keep doing what you're doing. And I just wanted to make sure I told you that on this podcast, because it's something that was important to me.
Oh, I appreciate it. I just been through a lot in life, and I don't know if you paid attention, but the week of playing Atlanta, I missed that whole week. Yep. I only practiced one day, that Monday, and I missed the whole week. I had to go back to Miami. I had to bury my brother on my dad's side, and, I was able to come back and be able to play in that Atlanta game, So it's just, it's stuff that, it's not stuff you could get used to, but, coming from where I'm from is rough, and, you just gotta, this my way of, hiding my pain, playing on the field, releasing my pain, releasing my anger instead of going out doing crazy things.
Yeah.
No, John, it's remarkable. You're a true inspiration. And it's not just because you're on this podcast that I'm saying this either. Everybody that listens to our show, everybody out there knows that I've been a huge John Brown supporter this entire offseason. I've been hyping you up, man. I just want you to stay healthy, stay on the field, because I know you can do dangerous things. I truly believe that this could be a breakout type season for you. And, even going back to 2015, you kind of already did break out. Bobby mentioned that stat at the beginning of the podcast, but, with Michael Floyd gone, Larry Fitzgerald getting towards the end of his career, I really feel like this could be a true breakout season for you. I just want you to stay healthy. That's basically what it all comes down to. And, speaking of that, I wanted to ask you one last question on the show while we have you. We all know that Bruce Arians is kind of a stickler when it comes to practice time and getting out there on the field, and we've heard some of that this preseason. But my question to you is that if you miss practice time during the week, does it mean that you're less likely to be involved in the game plan? Or are you at the point in your career where you've played under Arians for so long that you know the playbook and you're going to be involved regardless?
I think I would still be involved, but like once far as it's come, like when the coach knows the injury, he pull you, away from certain plays that he know you can't run. That would destroy the whole play. So, it would be more chances to make plays. But if you go out, like he's an understanding person. If he's like, oh, I'm feeling good today, he'll take his chances and, he'll give you those chances to prove yourself.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, John, I've got one more question for you, and I was looking at your combine numbers before this, and I just cannot believe human beings can be this fast. With your athleticism, I'm sure you could have played any big sport at a high level. What led you to put football first, and are you good at, like, all kinds of other sports, too?
I mean, the only sport that we have football. That's what it's known for in Miami. Basketball, I wasn't too good. I just played just to, be part of the team. But what most people don't know, I was a real good wrestler. I used to wrestle, my younger days up to like 9th grade in high school. And, I was pretty good at it. But, I love the game of football. And that's all I did year round.
John, it was a real pleasure, man. It was great to have you on, and we wish you all the best luck this year, especially with your health, and that the Cardinals make the playoffs this year.
Oh, yeah, we will. That's the goal. We're just working hard to get there.
Hey, John, real quick, I just wanted to say thanks again. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. You are a phenomenal guest, and I hope we get to talk to you in the future. I hope it's, with a whole lot more touchdowns on your resume, and I just wish nothing but the best of health to you, man.
Okay, thanks. Talk to you guys soon.
Take care, John. Thanks for coming on. That was John Brown of the Arizona Cardinals, wide receiver. Really great dude, phenomenal football player and talent, and this is the year for the breakout. All right, Tags, it's that time. Let's get into some hot takes, and joining us to make some bold predictions is Matt Camp of BleacherReport.com. You can find Matt on Twitter at @TheMattCamp. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure to be back here. The bold predictions part of the year, and then we get yelled at about these in like 6 or 7 weeks, so it's even better.
So we did the Listener League auction draft last night, and someone mentioned that they were going to bring up David Johnson, the tight end from Pittsburgh. Do you think if maybe you brought him up for $40 that someone would just bid without thinking about it?
I would say this. You can't There's a thing where we have fun with fantasy football, but I'll give you an example. I think that kind of goes against the fun of it. Someone in my league is new to fantasy. I was jumping in a league, and they dropped Jordan Reed and Pierre Garçon after the draft. And I was like, wait a minute.
Oh.
What are we doing here? And I went to the commissioner, and he's like, yeah, it's his first time playing. I was like, this is not good for him. He gets screwed because he doesn't really know what he's doing, and it's not good for the competitive balance. So, putting David Johnson up there, if I was the commissioner, I'd immediately go, hey, wait a minute. Let's run this back. Does anyone really want to win this way? I know you got to pay attention, but that's kind of goofy.
Yeah, if someone does it in DFS, it's a different story because David Johnson, the tight end from Pittsburgh, has actually started in DFS 0.2% of the time because people just press David Johnson and they just click on one of them. So that's on them. But in this case, yeah, I kind of side with Camp here.
Yeah, I'm with you guys too. It's just funny to think about. Anyway, we talked about Zeke last show, but we got to talk about him again because right now they're saying he might not miss any time. What do you guys think about this, Matt?
So I never really buried him in my rankings as much as I've seen others do. I have him at 13 at running back in PPR, so I've kept him fairly high. I've said that I would still be comfortable taking him to start maybe the third round, knowing that you have likely a David Johnson or a Bell or an Antonio Brown already on the team. So you're building in a little cushion around him. But I've kept this open, and I remember when this all first kind of came out, I said, I don't really want to bump him down too much because I have to be open to the possibility that this is going to go to court, and we like to talk fantasy and the numbers, but we have to be aware, and this is unfortunate, it's a terrible situation, that there's law and court involved, and this could go to higher courts, and maybe he's playing week 1 and maybe he gets cut down, or maybe this gets pushed back and then he gets suspended next season. But also, what if it's still 6 games and he gets suspended in the middle of the season? So, we're all guessing on this. I've had people say, well, are you going to move him up now? Or what do you think? And I go, I'll check with the commissioner and let me get back with you because no one really knows what's going to happen here. So I have always been open to the idea that he would be on the field for week number 1. But once again, it doesn't mean that the 6-game suspension is going to get wiped away. Maybe it just gets pushed back. So I'm not running up to go get him, but I'm not going to knock people who start to think about him in the third round. I'm not going to go higher than that, but I'm not going to knock people who say, well, I'll go get him, and I'll deal with it when I have to if he's going to be suspended. I don't know what's going to happen. It seems like a lot of things are very much up in the air. I'm not going to tell you this or that about that, but I'm acknowledging that right now he could very well be on the field for week 1.
I've been down for taking him in the 21 to 25 range. This morning with the news, I bumped him up to 15 because just the chance that he could go to 0 games, I mean, that would be too much to pass up in the second round. I'd say right now, if you simulated 1,000 outcomes, that the average outcome would be Zeke misses maybe 3.2, 3.5 games. And that's someone I want to take in the top 15.
Well, I want to chime in here because I've been adverse to taking Ezekiel Elliott, and Matt, I think I've received the same messages that you have in terms of people saying, well, Mike, now it's 0 or 3 games. Where would you draft him? I'm like, well, hold on a second. This is all hearsay, guys. Like,
right.
We don't know. The only thing that we know for a fact is that the NFL actually handed him a 6-game suspension. So that's what I have to go off of right now. I've always been of the mindset is that you cannot win a fantasy football league in the first 2 rounds, but you can lose it. And I know, Bobby, I know you brought up David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell last year. Those were historic seasons. Like, legitimately, you've talked about that before. Whereas Ezekiel Elliott, even if he misses 3 games, he can't have that historical season that those two did last year. He just can't do it because, well, he's going to be missing 3 to 6 games. So for me, again, it goes down to I'm taking guaranteed players over him.
Yep.
And you get to the point in your draft where there's question marks at the late second, early third round. Again, if you want to take the chance there, I understand that. And I understand people wanting to take the risk where you guys are. But for me, it's too much.
As I'm looking on Twitter, like someone just said to me, like, if Zeke's suspension is cut to 2 or less, do I grab him at 4, stick with Julio? I mean, it's still a 2-game suspension, and you're talking about Julio Jones or these top-end players where, look, if it's the third round, like I said, at least I've built something in of a foundation. But if you're talking the first 2 rounds, my thought is if you take him, you cannot have any confidence right now in what is going to happen, good or bad or whatever you want to say about it. So you have to be thinking about that. And I'm totally with what Mike said there, is that you can lose it early, and then you're trying to make up for it, and then maybe you feel the need to take a running back or a McFadden or somebody higher than you would have thought about. If it's going to be in the back of your head when you're taking a guy in the first or second round and you have concerns about him, skip over him and take somebody else. There's certainly enough talent out there.
Even if they get rid of the suspension altogether, I'm still taking Julio Jones over him. Maybe Beckham if Beckham's going to play week 1. I don't think that he is, so I would take Zeke over him at this point if we hear that Zeke gets down to 0 games. But here's what it comes down to. His VBD last year was 162 in 15 games. I mean, that's 11 per game. Even if he just plays 10 games, we're talking about a VBD of 110. That's a top 7 fantasy player. I understand you're going to miss a lot of time, but you're probably not going to miss him in the playoffs, and you've got yourself a top 3, top 5 fantasy player in the fantasy playoffs and a top 10 player if you count, VBD per game.
Yeah, and it's possible that he's better than last year. I can make the case as to why he should be better. He's another year in the league. The offensive line, they lost a couple pieces, but the pieces that they replaced do look solid. He should be used more in the receiving game. So that, there's optimism here for sure, and there is upside. If you're one of those guys that says go big or go home, Zeke's your pick. But I'll say this before. So I know we need to move on, but I'll say this: if you draft Ezekiel Elliott, make sure that you reach for Darren McFadden in the 7th or 8th round.
Let's take a step away for a word from one of today's sponsors. I'm excited to announce one of FantasyPros' new partners because it's a site I have loved for a long time. I use it for a lot of my research. I'm like a kid at a candy store at teamrankings.com because they have over 200,000 pages of all kinds of free stats, rankings, projections, and all sorts of other data to explore. What I want to tell you about them today is their premium services for office pools and sports betting. Since 2005, they built data-driven projection models for NFL, college football, and other sports, and thousands of hours researching strategy for sports pools like NFL Pick'em and Survivor Contest. A few of the guys from TeamRankings.com are actually going to come on the show next week for an episode about these sort of contests. We'll get all kinds of details to help you win these contests this year. In the meantime, they've got a great offer for you. Just go to TeamRankings.com/FantasyPros to get 20% off NFL Pick'em and Survivor Pool picks for 2017 and up to 65% off yearly subscription packages that include both betting and office pool picks. This set of offers is not shown anywhere else on their site and is exclusively available to Fantasy Pros podcast listeners. The discounts are available until this Sunday night, so make sure to hurry up. Again, that's teamrankings.com/fantasypros. Okay, so we're going to be doing our hot takes now, and we'll do this in our round table sort of way. So Tags, you'll give us the first one, then Matt, and around the table we go until we run out of time. And we'll just keep getting hot takes and, blasting each other for our terrible bold predictions.
All right, so let's start the quarterback position, and I'll give two right off the bat. So they're opposites here. I have one, Phillip Rivers is going to finish outside the top 15 quarterbacks for just the second time since 2008. And on the flip side of that, Ben Roethlisberger is going to finish as a top 5 quarterback for just the third time in his career.
Wow.
Let's hear it, boys.
Wow. Go ahead, Matt.
All right, so I have Rivers at 14, so I'm not exactly too far off with you there, although, I wonder about, can he light it up a little bit more with Keenan Allen being out there? I know Mike Williams, but he's got Tyrell Williams, so that still makes me feel pretty good about him. The whole thing with me is I might move him up if we hear more about Zeke's suspension over Dak Prescott, for instance. My concern with Ben Roethlisberger, while I know the talent is there, he has a lot of trouble staying on the field, and that has been a problem, especially the last couple of years, which is why I haven't ranked him so high. So I can't get on board with Ben just because I am almost banking on him to miss 2 games, knowing what his body is at the same time. I know his upside could easily be a top 5 quarterback.
I said all the wows, and since then I've looked at it and thought about it a little bit. And if Ben Roethlisberger stays healthy, there's maybe a 30% chance he plays the full season, just based on what he's done throughout his career. But if he stays healthy, I'd say there's a 50-50 chance he's a top 5 quarterback. Because when he's healthy, he's extremely good. So that one's not too crazy. Now, the Phillip Rivers one, his ADP is number 15, so that doesn't seem too crazy. I've got him at number 9. I just don't see how he doesn't have a career year this year. They got Hunter Henry's matured. They drafted Mike Williams. I know he's not going to be back till late October. Keenan Allen's back. They've still got Antonio Gates. Melvin Gordon is catching balls out of the backfield still. They've still got Travis Benjamin. And Melvin Gordon just wasn't efficient last year. I know they fixed their run blocking, but I just think this team starts to throw the ball a lot more. And this is a career year for Phillip Rivers. He's had some great years too, Tags.
Yeah, he does have great weapons, and it's better weapons than he's probably ever had in his career, and that's the part I can't dispute. But the issue I have is the offensive line is still a problem. They drafted Forrest Lamp, and he got hurt, and he's out for the season, which really hurts. Russell Okung, the left tackle, he's not necessarily a pass-blocking left tackle, which is really not good. He's a better run blocker than he is pass blocker, and their schedule calls for them to run the ball an awful lot. So, again, this is not a knock on Phillip Rivers, the quarterback, because I actually think Phillip Rivers deserves to be considered for the Hall of Fame. The Chargers have hurt him so much over his career, not giving him an offensive line, not getting him a number 1 wide receiver. When he had Vincent Jackson, he had some of his better years in the NFL. So Phillip Rivers is really, really, really good. It's just I don't like the schedule. I don't like the offensive line. The receivers, yes, they're better than they've been in a long time. That's for sure. But again, this league seems to have passed him by. Whereas, like, if you're a rushing quarterback, like, Matt, you mentioned Dak Prescott. Dak is going to get rushing totals. Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, these guys in his range are going to have rushing totals, which are going to bump them, even if they're a little bit below in the passing totals of Phillip Rivers. I just think they bump them up. And the part where people seem to have missed with me with Phillip Rivers, yes, strength of schedule is overrated from year to year, but at the same time, a lot of Phillip Rivers struggles, the ones that I look at in the schedule, come down to in-division opponents that he plays. Like for instance, he has not scored more than 14 fantasy points against the Chiefs in the last 3 years. That's a problem. The Broncos, we know that they're a top-tier defense. You don't want to play any quarterback against them. Going on the road against the Giants. His tough games are in the first 10 games. Over the second half of the schedule, over the last 3 years, Phillip Rivers has turned into a different quarterback, and that's where his good matchups are. So he kind of needs to reverse the trend. And again, I don't hate the quarterback. I just don't like the situation here.
Tags, let me ask you this. If Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger changed places for their careers, and Phillip Rivers was playing in Pittsburgh with that offensive line with Antonio
Rivers
Brown,
is better.
He's a surefire Hall of Famer. He probably wins 2-3 championships, right?
I agree. I think Phillip Rivers is a better quarterback than Ben Roethlisberger. Fight me, brah.
Yeah, send it to him on Twitter at Mike Tagliere NFL. All 3 of us agree, though, so you're going to have to get all of us.
Thanks for having my back, fellas.
Yeah, I got you, man. Matt, what's your first hot take here?
Ty Montgomery will not be a top 25 running back in PPR formats this year. I think there is just way too much excitement about a player. While I think he's very good, I just see it more of as a 1-2 combination with Jamal Williams. And the assumption that Ty Montgomery is going to take on such a big role when at this point last year he was a wide receiver, and now the thought is that he is going to be, and is being drafted as such, inside the top 20. I've seen him go as high as like 15, 14 at running back, and I just don't feel the need to just go that far in on a guy when there's a lot of questions about can he handle that role. I think he'll be very busy as a pass catcher, but I still have concerns about his pass pro. I still have some injury concerns about Ty Montgomery that were there last year, that popped up again this preseason, and I don't really know if he's built to be that guy, at least where he's getting drafted. I think there's just too high of expectations for a player with a lot to prove just about playing the position of running back. If you think he's going to be Theo Riddick, that's a different story. But I've seen him being projected for fairly high carry totals, and I think Jamal Williams is going to cut in there. And they have other options in the passing game. They have Devontae Adams. I don't think Randall Cobb is dead in the water. He's not what he was. And of course, they have Jordy Nelson, and they, of course, throw Martellus Bennett into the mix there too. Yep. So you may be losing some touchdowns there. I just don't see him being a guy that are being projected for 14, 15 carries a game. Jamal Williams is going to cut in there, and I'll throw this in there as well. I think Jamal Williams out carries Ty Montgomery this year.
I think it's a great idea. And I actually, this is something I thought about, right? If you go back to the 2015 Green Bay Packers, like, do you remember that season where Eddie Lacy and James Starks were kind of sharing things? Lacy got a little bit greater share of the carries, but Starks got more, like double the receptions. This could be a scenario where all of us are trying to pinpoint who's going to play, who's going to start. It might be both of them. This is not an Andy Reid offense where we can say one guy's going to be the workhorse. It's very possible that they try and highlight the strengths of each player. They may actually line both of them up on the field and then slide Ty Montgomery into the slot, almost like a 4 wide receiver set, and keep Jamal Williams in the backfield. Like, they can do so many things with this, but I have no issue with this take at all. And I know a friend of the podcast, Jake Seeley, would be giving you a high five right now.
I love Jamal Williams. I like Ty Montgomery though too. I think that he has won the job pretty clearly. I think they're going to give him, double-digit carries every single game. He's going to be a weapon in the backfield. I mean, he was already Theo Riddick last year. I think he gets better. His pass blocking has looked substantially better. He's like breaking metrics with his juke rates and yards after contact. I mean, you look at what he did compared to the other Green Bay running backs last year. He was phenomenal. There's a reason he won this job, but you're right. There's also a reason they drafted 3 rookie running backs. So I could definitely see that one, Matt. I like it.
All right, Bobby, what do you got for your bold prediction here?
Adrian Peterson is going to lead the NFL in touchdowns.
Not crazy at all, honestly, and that's the crazy part.
Oh man, I'm trying to be super bold here, and you're not even letting me be crazy. Come on.
That's the weird part. Is like I'm not one of those guys that has given up on Adrian Peterson. I think it's kind of crazy that people have given up on him already, and they're not giving up on Marshawn Lynch. This is the best offense Adrian Peterson has ever played in. Granted, Mark Ingram's not going away, but I remember I can't remember who it was that tweeted it out, and I'm sorry if I don't give you credit for that, but someone tweeted out that Mark Ingram over the last 3 years, his snaps per game, his carries per game have gone down each of the last 3 years. Now his reception totals have come up, but bringing in Alvin Kamara, bringing in Adrian Peterson, it shows me that they do not view Mark Ingram as a workhorse running back. They want him out there for...
Well, he's not durable either.
That's another thing, is that people, after last year, people just want to say, Ingram should be out there. Ingram wasn't the most durable player exactly before last year, so Adrian Peterson can definitely do this. It wouldn't shock me in the slightest. Camp, what's your take on Peterson?
So I get the touchdown thing, and that's, for me, that is the entirety of Peterson's fantasy value, is that he's got to score touchdowns because there's so many other options, even in his own backfield with Ingram, with Alvin Kamara, and I think we all know that Peterson's comments about him in the passing game were ridiculous. That's him being very, very confident in himself, which I'm not going to knock, but they already have 2 better pass catchers in the same backfield with Adrian Peterson, but they have Willie Snead, they have Michael Thomas. I think Kobe Fleener stinks, but he's still in the mix there. This is a team that's got a lot of options, so I think that's the biggest part of Adrian Peterson. I don't think it's a crazy take at all. I have him in the 8 or 9 touchdown area, and I think that's a pretty high number, but that's what he's going to have to get, I think, to have serious fantasy value on a weekly basis. So for me, I get it. Now, I'll say this about Ingram. He did play all 16 games last year, and I know that doesn't happen very often, and he's had some weird fluky injuries in there as well, so I throw that in there. And I also say that while those numbers have gone down, he's actually been more efficient because he had his best fantasy finish last last year, and he's actually improved the last 3 years in terms of PPR finishes. So he's been very good. Now, adding, to me, the real hurt to him is actually adding Kamara to the mix and taking away those potential catches.
Agreed.
Because I know Peterson's going to get those goal line touches, but I always kind of expect Ingram to lose a random touchdown to a third-string tight end or a fourth-string running back. Like, I know that's going to happen, but then you throw the catches in, which I think has been an underrated part of Ingram, and that's where I really get concerned about him. So I don't think it's crazy at all to say that Peterson can do that because, as you both said, it's a great offense. When you get opportunities in a great offense, hey, if he's got to convert from 1 yard out, yeah, I think he can do that 10 or 12 times.
Let me add a little bit to that, okay, guys? The Saints finished 6th in the NFL in rushing touchdowns last year with 17. This was before they had the best goal line back in the NFL. I mean, Adrian Peterson, he has upside for 15, 16, 17 rushing touchdowns in this offense. And let's not forget, Adrian Peterson, every year he's been in this league, 80-plus yards per game. I'm not saying that he's going to get all these touches and everything. Tim Hightower had 133 rushes this year. So it's not crazy to think Peterson's going to have 160, maybe 200 carries this year. And if he does, I don't see why, if he's healthy, he's not going to keep stealing more and more touches, because if Adrian Peterson's healthy, guys, who's the better player, Adrian Peterson or Mark Ingram?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think at this point in their career, I'd probably say Mark Ingram.
What?
I'm not writing off
Wow.
I'm not writing off Peterson. The reason I say Ingram is I think he better suits the offense, just because he's a better pass catcher. Peterson, over his career, he's shown us that he's not the greatest pass catcher. And Drew Brees checks down to his running backs a lot more than people think. Most people would seem to think that Drew Brees has one of the deeper depth of targets in the NFL. He doesn't. He actually checks down quite a bit. I want to say last year his air yards per target was like third lowest in the NFL. So he checks down an awful lot, and I just think Ingram better suits that. But at the same time, Peterson on the goal line, we saw them not trust Ingram last year. Do you remember Mark Ingram's temper tantrum on the sideline when they put Tim Hightower in on the goal line?
John Kuhn had 4 touchdowns.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I think the touchdown thing is legit. I think there's a realistic possibility. Peterson scored, any year he's played significant time, he has scored 10 or more touchdowns in every single season. So we know he's a monster on the goal line, and he did that behind some pretty bad offensive lines in Minnesota. So I'm aboard with it.
So before Tags gives his next hot take, it's time to remind you all for the last time about this Odell Beckham signed jersey giveaway from pristineauction.com. All you have to do to enter the sweepstakes is review us and subscribe on iTunes, then take a screenshot and send it to us at contest@fantasypros.com. The contest ends Sunday, so make sure to get your entries in by then. By the way, Pristine Auction has all kinds of goodies for you, from signed helmets and some great memorabilia for your office or cave. Please check out what they have for you, and it's about that time where we can actually start thinking about Christmas presents. And I'll tell you what, Pristine Auction makes for a great Christmas present for the father-in-law or your brother or what have you. And when you support them, please let them know Fantasy Pros sent you. That way we can keep doing these giveaways. Again, that's pristineauction.com. Okay, Tags, let's hear your next round of hot takes.
All right, my next hot take, I'm going to move to the running back position, kind of piggyback off that. I have 2 here. My first one is that both Carlos Hyde and Kareem Hunt outscored DeMarco Murray and Jordan Howard.
Yeah, baby.
And then my second bold take is that Amir Abdullah and Mike Gillislee finished as top 12 running backs.
Wow, that's a lot to handle there. All right, so I'm going to knock Mike Gillislee down right away. This is a player that I think we all expected when they signed him to an offer sheet. So you got to sign him away from Buffalo. Okay, there should be a big role there. Does he play the LeGarrette Blount role? And I think that's easy to say that he should fit into that role. But I now look in that backfield, and White and Lewis remain as of now. We'll see if that's the case at the end of the weekend. But those guys remain as of now. And I see them bringing in Rex Burkhead, and I've seen excitement about Rex Burkhead, which I do understand that could get people with googly eyes as well because of what you've seen them do in the preseason, but it seems like they have some other options outside of what they had last year, specifically having Burkhead and being able to rely on those other 2 running backs, that you don't have to put such a heavy workload on Mike Gillislee. And I think that's another guy very similar to Adrian Peterson that will be tied to, and just like Blunt was last year to an extent, his fantasy value will be tied to the touchdowns. Now, when you play New England, you can kind of bank on that a little bit more. But I also think this is going to be a game-by-game situation. And we also know that Gillislee, he's been a second banana. That has been his career. And he has never, I don't think, slated for a role like he has now. We're talking about a running back that has less than 160 carries to his career. And now, if he's going to be a top 12 back, that tells me, because he's not much of a pass catcher, that we're talking about 200-plus carries. And he's already been banged up. And when Bill Belichick comes right out and says he's not where he needs to be, he still has some catching up to do, this could be a slow start for Mike Gillislee and then cut into that carry total. So that's my concern with him getting all of those touches. Abdullah, to me, there's a lot to prove in Detroit in that backfield. Are they going to be a team that consistently runs the ball? Are they going to be a team that runs the ball with any kind of success? Last year, Theo Riddick was basically a pass catcher, and that was the extension of their ground game. So there will be a lot of changes there in Detroit for Abdullah to get to that point. I do like his talent. I just wonder if he can get to that level.
You know who's really talented in that Lions backfield is Dwayne Washington. He got his crack last year behind that offensive line and did nothing. I know Amir Abdullah is probably more talented, but don't pretend that they had no running backs last year. Dwayne Washington is a pretty good running back. I'm just scared of Amir Abdullah. He has the upside to finish as a top 12 running back. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if he's going to get the volume for it either, but I could definitely see that happening.
Well, so Dwayne Washington was someone who he interested me a little bit, and actually I kind of got some crap for backing him a little bit. But going into NFL's next gen stats, he was actually the NFL's most least efficient running back last year in terms. He traveled, I think it was 5.6 yards for every yard gained, which is just
wow, that's stupid.
That's historically like bad. Actually, what's funny is DeAndre Washington from Oakland. He actually was the most north-south runner, and that's despite him being as little as he is.
Wow.
I think that kid I think he has a little bit Maurice Jones-Drew to him, which is why I like him as a late sleeper to handcuff like Marshawn Lynch, or not even a handcuff, but as like a late round sleeper. But going back to Abdullah, Theo Riddick is somebody who's been in a red shirt throughout the entire offseason, essentially. He had double wrist surgery.
Right.
You wouldn't think that would have you in a non-contact jersey, but it did. And obviously it lasted all the way through the preseason. He only saw 2 snaps or 2 targets, 1 rushing attempt, 1 target. He dropped the target that he had. He didn't play in preseason week 4. There are red flags around Theo Riddick. Meanwhile, Amir Abdullah, in the one game that he did play last year, the full game, it was against the Colts, granted, but it was over 16 touches in that game, over 100 and something yards, a touchdown. Everything we've seen out of the preseason shows he's the starter. He's the guy that they drafted over David Johnson. Going back, the Cardinals wanted to draft Amir Abdullah over David Johnson, but they settled for David Johnson because Detroit took Abdullah. So that's something that we learned watching. I think it was the All or Nothing show. It was behind the scenes that they wanted Abdullah. So the scouting there is obviously, everybody knows Abdullah is good. So
I want to talk about Gillislee, by the way.
I want to go back to Gillislee too, because I want to defend him a little bit here. I think he's the only player on this team that could actually take on the blunt role. Like Rex Burkhead, everybody could talk about him, but I think he's more of like a utility player, and I think they're going to use him in what his splash play was in the preseason. It was a reception. Mike Gillislee's not going to be brought in for his hands. He's brought in to pound the ball on the goal line. He's a guy last year. If you go back and people want to say, well, LaShawn McCoy sees, stacked boxes and then Gillislee comes in and that's why he's able to break off these long runs. That's a bunch of crap, because I went back and looked at it. Mike Gillislee was number 3 last year in terms of stacked boxes. 49% of the time, whereas LaShawn McCoy was down around, I think it was 28%. So it's a bit, or 38%. It's a big difference between those two. Mike Gillislee succeeded when there were stacked boxes. LeGarrette Blount last year, I think it was 72 red zone carries. Nobody on this team can handle the red zone carries like Gillislee. They didn't go out and steal him from Buffalo not to use him. Granted, the injuries hampered him a little bit, but they got him some work in the preseason. He scored a touchdown. He looked good in that game. Playing on this offense, I want all the Mike Gillislee, and honestly, for cheap.
Yeah.
You're not paying for him to be a top 12 running back. You're getting him around that RB30 range, which is just well worth the risk for me.
He's led the league in yards per carry over the last 2 seasons. He's led the league in efficiency on the goal line over the last 2 seasons. And the Patriots bring him in to replace Blount. Let's not forget, Blount might be like bottom 5 starting running backs in the NFL. He's not very talented. He was good at his role, but you know what? Gillislee's even better. Blount finished as the number 7 running back last year in the system. Who's to say Gillislee can't do better than that when he's more talented?
I agree. And like that's the thing, Blount caught 7 passes last year. So I wouldn't even worry about the pass catching thing. And Gillislee,
I mean, James White and Deion Lewis were there last year too. It's not like anything really changes here.
And that's where part of the thing comes in. Like Burkhead's contract, it wasn't that big. But with the loss of Edelman, James White is going to get more targets. Deion Lewis becomes a little bit more utilized. Rex Burkhead could be lined up in the slot. And I'm not going to say Burkhead is like literally nothing, but what I am saying is that Mike Gillislee is the guy that you want inside that 5-yard line. And if he has that role, he's going to finish as a top 24 running back. I think he's more than just a goal line back, and that's why I say, as a bold prediction, I say he finishes top 12.
All right, Matt, what's your second hot take for us?
Let's move on here to the wide receiver position, and I have both Stephon Diggs and Terrell Pryor inside my top 15
Sweet.
At wide receiver this year. Diggs battled some injuries last year and played through them at times, which I think hurt when you look at his numbers. But when this guy was healthy, he was killing it. And I actually kind of like the Viking offense. The O-line issues, I will not ignore. I know they are there. But I think Sam Bradford doesn't get enough credit for the job he does. It's not going to be great for his fantasy numbers, but I remember talking to guys like Adam Thielen last year on my radio show, and he said, like, from day one, Bradford stepped in here. Remember, that happened very late with the trade with Carson Wentz and all that stuff in Bridgewater. He stepped in, and he was ready to go, and he was working extra time, and I think he is the kind of quarterback that, for the most part, does make receivers around him better. I've never said that about Cam Newton. Now, it doesn't mean that he doesn't throw short of the sticks too often or check it down, which he tends to have to do with that O-line, but he connected with Diggs, he connected with Thielen. Kyle Rudolph had a career year last year. This is quietly a pretty nice passing attack, and I think Diggs is a special player who can really take it to that next level. Terrell Pryor, along with him now, going to a better quarterback in Kirk Cousins, a better situation in Washington, which I think they'll throw it a little bit more there. Just more opportunity for him there. And now maybe you say, well, in Cleveland last year, he got all those targets and he had the high target share, which I understand. But at the same time, when he goes to a Washington team that has Jordan Reed, that has Jamison Crowder, and we'll see about Josh Doxson, who knows, it's not like teams can put all, they can't totally put all of their attention on Terrell Pryor. So
You're right.
Part of it to me is betting on talent and opportunity, because I look in that really from 13 to about 24 range, and I've seen rankings all over the place, and I think everything is defensible there. You could pick these guys apart all over the place. You could talk about, well, Larry Fitzgerald's been solid. Well, he doesn't have a high ceiling. Or Demaryius Thomas has got longevity, but I don't like his quarterback situation. Or, hey, if Keenan Allen stays on the field, he can be a top 12 wide receiver, and I'm not going to doubt that. I'm ranking these guys high because I believe that they have very good chances to hit those ceilings, and they have high ceilings, and I like their quarterbacks there, and I don't think we've seen the best of them just yet.
We've both been hyping up Diggs. In fact, Tags and I both wrote that he's the player you can't avoid drafting just earlier this week because the schedule is so great. Tags, can you give the numbers on what Diggs did in games where he wasn't on the injury list?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that's kind of gone overlooked. Diggs finished, actually, even last year, he finishes the number 14 wide receiver in PPR points per game.
Yeah.
And that's while playing through injuries. When he was off the injury report, which were about half of his games, 9.3 receptions, 107 yards per game, and 0.3 touchdowns. Diggs reminds me a lot of, and I'm not saying he's Antonio Brown type talent, but if you go and compare the situations where people were hesitant to get on Antonio Brown earlier in his career because they were like, Marcus Wheaton was the guy that was drafted to be even better than Antonio Brown. They expected him to be better. Mike Wallace was there. In going to Diggs, I don't know if Sam Bradford is necessarily the guy that can take him to that elite level wide receiver territory like Roethlisberger did Antonio Brown, but I do think that Diggs is one of the receivers that he can beat almost anybody on the field. I think he's one of the best route runners out there. He's not a big guy, but he can move all around the field. They'll play him in the slot. I know that Thielen's going to be there more often, and that makes me happy because you're not locking Diggs into that conversation with guys like Golden Tate and Jarvis Landry where he can only play there. He can be moved all around the field. He's a chess piece. They have a phenomenal schedule where he doesn't play any top 10 cornerbacks. Stephon Diggs, I'm all aboard. He was actually in my thing. I said that one of my bold predictions I had written down was that Diggs breaks out, finishes higher than Dez Bryant, Demaryius Thomas, and DeAndre Hopkins.
Sweet, man. Yeah. And then Terrell Pryor, I like him too. I've come around on Terrell Pryor. I know Tags isn't quite there on Pryor, but he's got a ton of talent. And Kirk Cousins, he's probably going to throw for 4,800 yards this year. He throws for so many yards, and Pryor's the best guy on that offense. We'll see about Doxson. I know Tags is high on Doxson, but I like the calls, Matt.
So Pryor, here's the issue with Pryor with me. I actually have started to come around on him because the opportunity seems like it's going to be there. I was worried about Doxson, about Reed, about Crowder, all these options, right? But one of my bold predictions I have down, I'll just throw it out here now since we're talking about it, is that Jordan Reed plays less than 6 games this year. And I'm saying that because I believe his foot is more of a concern than they're letting on. I think it's Sammy Watkins all over again, where if we watched last year, everybody knew Watkins had a foot issue coming into the season. He attempted to play through it. He was ineffective. They ended up shutting him down for a long time. I think that happens with Jordan Reed. I think he ultimately has surgery on this foot, and he plays less than 6 games. Therefore, we already have Josh Doxson injured, which is, it's just blowing my mind that this kid can't stay healthy, because I do think he's extremely talented. With that being said, Terrell Pryor, he's going to get the opportunity again if these things are happening, right? And I don't necessarily think that Terrell Pryor is the best wide receiver as far as his hands go, but he has shown a lot of dedication to route running. He has a crazy size speed combination, which presents opportunities, right? So I have moved him up into as a wide receiver 17, but again, I struggle to put him higher than that. And I know I'm a little bit lower than the expert consensus, but yeah.
I would say this, and we can move on from this after this, is that you do have to pay up for Pryor from what I've seen in drafts, where that's not happening with Diggs. And I'll just give you an example. I did 2 auctions this week, and I got Diggs in both. One of them, which I did a couple of days ago, I got him for $15, which I felt like I was stealing at a $200 cap. Yeah. And then in the other one I did, also a $200 cap, and this is more bonus scoring. I paid up for him for $25, and I still felt like I was getting a pretty good price on him because I'm willing to pay for that upside, and I like to kind of focus in on those low-end wide receiver ones and guys I have in the wide receiver 2 tier. So you're seeing him, even in redrafts, go as the 25th, 24th wide receiver off the board, whereas you do have to usually pay up a top 15 wide receiver price for Pryor. So if you're trying to pick between the two, look, you can likely wait on Diggs, although I have been in drafts, and this is important to know your drafts and know your league. If you know people do like a guy, you may have to go up and get him. I've seen that with Diggs. Other times, like I said, in these auctions, I've been able to get him for cheap. So you got to get a feel for where your draft is at and the people you're playing with, because maybe if I'm in drafts of you guys, it wouldn't be so easy to get Diggs at that price.
That's right.
Yeah, for sure. And if you walk into your draft, just like as a quick little tidbit here, if you grab one of the elite wide receivers in the first round, I think you could wait at wide receiver. And if you end up with Diggs as your wide receiver 2 and Jeremy Maclin as your 3, I'm happy with that.
All right, guys, my second round of hot takes here. I've got 2 of them at the wide receiver position for you. Robbie Anderson will finish with over 1,000 receiving yards. He ran a 4.30 40. He's 6'3". He's really the only option in the offense. They're starting some random guy in week 1 opposite of Robbie Anderson. So he's going to be the dude. He's looked pretty good in the second half of last season. And then number 2, Keenan Allen is going to lead the NFL in receptions. If you look at what he's done throughout his career, 7.1 receptions per game. If you spread that out to a full season, that's right at 95 receptions. Larry Fitzgerald led the league last year with 107. I know Keenan Allen, is going to compete with all these guys. Mike Williams is there. Hunter Henry's there. Travis Benjamin's still there. Melvin Gordon's in the backfield. But Keenan Allen, remember, he put up 7.1 per game when he was 21 years old. Now he's in the prime of his career. He looks great in the preseason. I think he's got a real crack at 110 receptions.
What's your take on that, Matt?
So Keenan Allen, you didn't mention Tyrell Williams, who I think is the guy that's going to get very busy there. Mike Williams, who knows? But the other names you mentioned, it is very busy there. I just look and see a guy that played 9 games over the last 2 years, and he's had some bad luck. There's no doubt about it. I have trouble saying it's the prime of his career when we haven't seen the guy for 9 games, for more than 9 games in the last 2 years. And I'm with you. I think he's still a young guy at 25. There's plenty of talent there. He has the trust of Phillip Rivers, and sounds like we're all on the same page with Phillip Rivers, and he's been a guy who's made guys around him better that are lesser talents than Keenan Allen, and I think Keenan Allen's a heck of a player. So I get it. I think he could be very busy if he stays healthy. The Jets, I can't get excited about any Jet. I can't talk about 1,000-yard season for any Jet because I think we might see 2, 3, 4. They might bring Ken O'Brien back to play quarterback this year. Boomer Esiason is still in New York. He might get a couple snaps this year. So I'm not going to get too excited about Robbie Anderson. I know that he's basically all they have. The only Jet I'm even considering is Bilal Powell because I guess my thought is that he's going to be busy no matter what the score is. He'll get you those garbage time catches. But if Robbie Anderson's the top receiver there, I'm still not seeing a 1,000-yard season for him.
Yeah, I have difficulty getting on board with the 1,000-yard thing. I was writing something on week 1 about the Jets matchup that they have, and Robbie Anderson is someone who's going to offer you potential wide receiver 3, like when he's on the field and when Josh McCown is starting, because I think Josh McCown is willing to heave the ball downfield. But the problem is that I do believe the Jets at some point, and I think it's before the halfway point in the season, I think they go to Christian Hackenberg, and you want no part of any wide receiver. I don't care if he's targeting a wide receiver 12 times a game. You don't want him. Like, just stay away from Christian Hackenberg. So, I mean, is it possible? Yeah, I think it's possible if they leave Josh McCown in there for a long time, but that's why this is a bold prediction.
Okay, guys, so we're going to do our third and final round of the bold prediction hot takes. Tags, why don't you go ahead and start us off, and we're going to move a little faster this time.
No, for sure. And I'm just going to piggyback off what I said about Ben Roethlisberger earlier. This is the first time that we've seen the Steelers offense healthy, ready to rock. So my bold prediction is that the Steelers offense produces not one, but two top 20 wide receivers, the top fantasy running back, and a top 12 fantasy tight end. I want you to, I know.
Wow.
Now, after saying that, they just traded for Vance McDonald. That's a great late round stash. Or if you're playing in best ball leagues and you're on the clock with your last pick, Vance McDonald is a phenomenal athlete. He's a field stretcher.
Yes, he is.
Of guys with, I think it was 25 or more targets last year. He finished behind only Rob Gronkowski in terms of yards per reception. So he's a big play waiting to happen. I just want you to think back, and before you think that this is crazy and it's not possible, go back to the Bears offense. That was led by Jay Cutler. I think Ben Roethlisberger's better, but Jay Cutler was able to make Matt Forte a top 12 running back. He was able to make Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey top 24 wide receivers. And Martellus Bennett was a top 12 tight end. So I don't think it's crazy, but I think people may initially hear this and think, no way. But once you start to think about it, it's actually a realistic possibility.
Forte was top 5, too.
He was. He had me until the tight end thing. I had Brown at 1. I have Martavis Bryant at 18. I have Bell at 2, so that's certainly feasible there, and it can happen. Vance McDonald, to me, what I worry about, and I'm not saying that you're nuts because Jesse James does nothing for me, and that's why they brought Ladarius Green in, I think, as well. At least last year, that didn't work out, is he's just joining the team. So he's got a little bit of a learning curve here, and I don't think they're going to rush him out there. So to finish as a top 12 tight end, maybe if this move was made, earlier in the offseason, you go, all right, he's got his time, and, he doesn't have to necessarily battle for playing time right off the bat. I can understand a little more because I'm with you. This offense could be arguably the best in football on paper, and if everybody stays healthy, they might be the best offense in the league, and they're a team that could seriously challenge the Patriots in the AFC. But I'm just not there with Vance McDonald yet. I think part of it was the Niners are clearly in a new regime. The contract extension he got was from the old regime. So, he's an interesting player. I think that's what they wanted to get out of Ladarius Green last year, and they didn't. They did it for a little bit. So if he was there earlier, maybe. But for everything else he said, I'm with you. I've got Martavis Bryant in plenty of leagues this year.
Awesome.
I was a big fan of Vance McDonald. You guys probably remember me talking about it if you've been listening to the show for a while, but I actually think moving from San Francisco to Pittsburgh drops his appeal because there's so many weapons there. In San Francisco, Pierre Garçon was there, and then Vance McDonald. And like you said, he's an athlete. He's a playmaker. I would say he's one of the top 5 playmakers in football at the position. And I think Vance McDonald's probably going to have 3, maybe 4 games where he gets 100+ yards and a touchdown or 2. But besides that, I don't really know if I want him in fantasy. But yeah, he could finish in the top 12. That's why it's a bold prediction, but I'm not going to bank on it. I've got him ranked about 17, 18 right now at the position.
Well, here's a question for you, though. So this is the question I'll ask. Bobby, do you think that Vance McDonald can score 6 or more touchdowns with Roethlisberger?
He could, yeah.
Okay, so there were just 12 tight ends last year who scored 6 or more touchdowns. 11 of them finished as top 12 tight ends. So therefore, I'm buying Vance McDonald, guys.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's going to finish with 6 or more, but yeah, he definitely could.
It's a hot take. I get it.
Yeah. Okay, Matt, what's your last round for us?
I got Pierre Garçon as a top 20 wide receiver this year, and I don't even know if that's that much of a bold take anymore. I'm looking at targets, and I see a ton of them available in San Francisco. I am in Kyle Shanahan, we trust. He has been a very fantasy-friendly coordinator for just about his entire career. We have seen him do it with great offenses like we saw last year in Atlanta. We've seen him do it with just decent offenses in previous stops. So I look at Pierre Garçon. I see a great receiver. And Brian Hoyer is nothing to get excited about, but he knows what he's doing out there. He knows how to run this offense. And who are we talking about here? Goodwin's a deep threat. Jeremy Curley's a guy. We'll see what happens to tight end. I do say I have a player that maybe I could throw this in here. I think Kyle Juszczyk can be a top 30 running back in PPR this year because his ability to catch the football out of the backfield, and they've used him a little bit as a tight end. So he's got a little bit of that H-back. Kind of reminds me of Dallas Clark in the way they may use him there. And there's just not a lot of weapons. I mean, that's part of it on Juszczyk for me, and that's a big part of it on Pierre Garçon. He is so far better than anybody else that they have, and he had his best season ever a couple of years ago with Kyle Shanahan as his coordinator in Washington. So I don't even think if I'm reaching that deep anymore, yet I've seen him. He's been one of my favorite values in drafts. You've seen him go outside of the top 25. I've seen him go outside of the top 30 in terms of the wide receiver position, and he's just the guy that I think, based on targets and opportunity, you don't have to get too excited about the Niners. I'm not saying that, but they have the right coordinator there, and you have a top option who should get a ton of targets this year. So for volume alone, and of course the fact that he is a very good player, I don't think I'm even saying to be that bold to be saying Garçon could be top 20 in PPR this year at wide receiver.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing as McDonald to me. Like, I'm not banking on it, but it could definitely happen. There's a scenario where he's Golden Tate 2.0.
Yep.
I mean, he could be the same type of player. There's also a scenario where he just doesn't get that many targets, and he's Pierre Garçon from last year. So I think his ADP is about right now. I don't think he's as safe of a play as I was talking about a month ago. But, Pierre Garçon does have a pretty solid upside.
Yeah, for sure. Pierre Garçon, I'm worried about the upside in terms of top 20, but I think I've said it before, is that I think he's one of the easiest players to project this season. And some people may say, well, last year, we thought Torrey Smith was going to get targets. You do not pay Pierre Garçon $16-17 million in a year to come in via free agency when guys like Terrell Pryor and Alshon Jeffrey were getting $12 million and below. You don't do that. So Pierre Garçon is going to get targeted, and if you get 120 targets, you're essentially a lock for wide receiver 3 production. My concern, the reason I don't think that he has the upside of maybe top 20 is just because the lack of scoring attempts. I just don't think that this offense is going to score a whole lot. But Kyle Shanahan could have a bigger effect than I think. And I've said that Brian Hoyer is I think he's a competent NFL starting quarterback. I think he's better than some starters out there. I'd rather have him in Houston throwing to DeAndre Hopkins than either Tom Savage or Deshaun Watson.
Definitely.
So I don't think we can really hate on Pierre Garçon, but I agree. When he first went to the 49ers, his ADP stuck around the wide receiver 50 for the longest time, and he was like it was like
crazy.
Automatic pick in best ball. And now his ADP has caught up to where he's being taken in that wide receiver 3 range. But I think that's at minimum he finishes as a top 32 wide receiver.
I don't understand why they didn't just offer him like $9 million. No one was going to beat that. Like, why did they have to throw him $16 million? That's Tavon Austin money, which is in itself ridiculous. I mean, he's the number 3 wide receiver for the Rams, and they gave him $17 million. The Rams, man, Jeff Fisher was a doofus.
Well, if you recall, hold on a second. If you recall, Pierre Garçon was one of the first players signed in free agency, so I don't think that the 49ers they didn't gauge the market and where it was at, because Alshon Jeffrey and Terrell Pryor took some time to get signed. I don't think Pierre Garçon would have got paid what he did.
Might have been tougher to sell him on a rebuilding process as well, so you got to overpay for that as opposed to going to a good team. I mean, they had the room, so they said, you know what, Kyle Shanahan bringing in his guy more than anything else. I mean, I think that's the selling point, is it's his guy. He's had his opportunity before with Shanahan. It worked out. I think that tells Garçon you can come somewhere and do well. But yeah, I think you kind of have to overpay when you're in a rebuilding process.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, guys, I saved the best and boldest hot take for last. You guys are going to like this one. Maybe. Stephen Morris is going to be a top 8 quarterback through mid-October.
What?
Oh, yeah, man. Oh, yeah. Andrew Luck, he's not playing in week 1. I don't think he's going to play for a long time. There's a chance he misses 6 weeks. If you look at their schedule, they've got the Rams, the Browns, the 49ers, the Titans. Those are some bad offenses. Have you seen Stephen Morris play this preseason? He looks like Dak freaking Prescott. Stephen Morris is really good. He's got T.Y. Hilton. Okay, he's got Dante Moncrief. He's got Frank Gore, who catches balls out of the backfield, Robert Turbin. They've got, Jack Doyle and everything. He's playing with Andrew Luck's toys, and I'm telling you, Stephen Morris is a worthy starting quarterback in the NFL, and he's going to prove it.
Before I ream into Bobby here, Matt, do you want to chime in on this?
Have you been hanging out with Jim Irsay in the late nights?
No, man. Stephen Morris is
I
good,
must
dude.
ask.
Stephen Morris could start for 6-7 teams in the NFL.
So the Colts stink besides Andrew Luck. They have T.Y. Hilton in terms of toys, but Dante Moncrief's got a lot to prove. Jack Doyle is a solid tight end. I'm not knocking him, but I don't see much else there. The O-line still gives me concerns, and he's not playing at Miami anymore. So the Colts are just, they're not good. And Stephen Morris is kind of bounced around the NFL too, and they're still kind of thinking about Tolzien. So I don't know. Good luck.
Yeah, my take on this was that if Andrew Luck was really going to miss like 6 or 7 weeks, so we're going to find out really soon because they have to decide whether he's going to remain on the PUP list because then he'd miss the first 6 weeks of the season. But I think that the Colts would have brought in a veteran if they knew Luck was going to miss that much time. I don't think I right now I'm bracing for 2 games for Luck. I think that if you assume that he's out for 2 games, I think you'll be fine with that. But as for Stephen Morris, dude, have you seen the offensive line that Andrew Luck plays behind?
Yes,
Ryan Kelly is out, the centerpiece of it, the center.
That's right.
He's actually out for at least the first half of the season. So this is going to be a worse offensive line. He doesn't have a run game with Frank Gore right now. The receivers, like T.Y. Hilton, is a deep threat. It is what he is. He's not a possession receiver. Dante Moncrief can never seem to stay healthy. There's so many questions here, but no.
So when it happens, I am going to, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to gloat big time.
Yes, you should. And you should. If you're right on this one, you should gloat literally for the rest of the season.
Okay, sounds good. I'll plan on that. All right. Well, Matt, that's all the time we have for the show. Really appreciate you coming on and taking it a little easy on me in the Stephen Morris take, but I know it sounds crazy now. The schedule looks beautiful.
I appreciate it, guys. And, Bobby, you're just going to get a ton of followers in Indy now off of this. So that should help your Twitter.
That sounds good. All right. Take care, Matt.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
So that's all we have for the show today. Next week, we've got another 3 episodes coming up, and we're going to be talking about week 1. We're going to be doing some waiver wire stuff, answering questions from the listener mailbag. That's mailbag@fantasypros.com. Then we're going to be talking about starter sit, and we're going to talk about DFS next week. It is going to be fun. Make sure to subscribe and review us on iTunes, and make sure to get your entries in for that signed Odell Beckham jersey giveaway from pristineauction.com. Thanks to Pristine Auction, teamrankings.com/fantasypros, and playdraft.com for sponsoring today's show. For Mike Tagliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening, and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me do